Hi guys, this is the third video for Module 4. We're going to go on and add some more controls to our application. We just finished adding a slider and a label that shows us the value associated with the slider. We're then going to add a segmented control that controls the display of the lower half of the screen for this application. If we pick a segmented control is such that it's like radio buttons. You can pick one out of however many segments there are. We're going to only have two segments, and if one of the segments is selected, we'll show a pair of switches in the lower part of the screen. If the other segment is selected, we'll show a button, and the button's going to initiate a modal dialog if we push it. So let's get started. So first of all, let's put our segmented control on the user interface. And we're going to center that. We'll space it to the slider, and then we'll just center it. So we'll get a segmented control. I'm going to go ahead and add some constraints. We want to center that horizontally, and we want to, as far as its spacing goes, we'll control its spacing to the top. And that should, as you can see now, our little yellow caution sign went away. We've got our constraints sorted out. We're going to call the segments are numbered 0 and 1. We'll go to the attributes inspector for the segmented control, and we're going to have two segments. Segment 0 we will call the switches, and segment 1 we'll call the button. And we'll need an action method for it. So let's pull up our actually, I'm going to go, before I start doing things with the assistant editor, I'm going to go ahead and get all the stuff laid out that I need to lay out. So let's get the switches. If I could spell, grab a switch, put it here, another switch, put it here. I'm going to align the tops of those two, so I've got to select them both. Align their top edges. I'm gonna I want the sides of them to correspond. I want to use the human interface guidelines to position them, and then I'm going to control their distance to the sides. Oops. And vertically, let's control the distance to here. That's vertical spacing I want to set, and I think our constraints are all satisfied for that stuff now. Then I want to add a button. And we're going to put the button in line with these things. I'm going to align its top edge with the top edge of one of the switches to line everything up. So we'll align top edges, and I want to center that horizontally in the container. So I think now I've got all that stuff properly laid out. What I want the button to say is not button, but do something. So we'll change its text, and it'll resize automatically. And what I want the segmented control to do is cause the button, cause the switches or the button to display or undisplay. So I'm going to set up an action method for the segmented control, outlets for all this stuff down here. We're not going to make the switches and the button do anything yet. We'll see if we can get the segmented control to make things appear and disappear. First of all, how do you make something appear or disappear? There's an you use the attributes inspector, and the attribute that controls that is whether or not the control is hidden at the time. Initially, we're going to want the switches segment is selected. The selected segment is 0 for the segmented control to begin with. And we can set that in the viewDidLoad method. So we'll go to our view controllers code and segmented. What did I haven't called that thing any yet, so I don't have an attribute, an outlet for it. So before I can add any code, I'm going to put code in here to make sure that the correct segment is initially selected. But before I can do that, I do need to now set up bunches of outlets. And I got the wrong thing. Let's see. I want the storyboard. Go away. I'm getting this in the wrong place. Well, the storyboard's somehow not. Let's see if I can make this work, or if I have to have these in the same window for it to work. I want outlets for all these things. So this outlet we're going to call the trying to decide what a good name would be for this. Actually, I'm not gonna do it right now. I'm gonna let me do the switches. I'll call them left switch and right switch. And I think I've somehow, since I had them both selected, managed to cause them both to get connected. Yeah, so let's see. No, just the left switch. So I can let me go ahead. Somehow I've got the button selected now. I think let's this one to be the right switch. Okay, so the left switch is connected there. I'm linking to the wrong thing here. I can select that switch in the outline just fine. And let's drag its touch up inside event to the left switch outlet. Okay, so we've got the left switch connected there, the right switch connected there. The do something button we still need to add an outlet for. And now that we've added those, we can set their attributes, and we can add an action method for the segmented control to adjust them. So initially we want the switches selected and the button invisible. So we'll go to the attributes inspector for the button, and we're going to make it hidden. Also, and we'll make sure that the switches are, oops, I need the storyboard back. The switches attributes are not hidden. And the code we want to add to the action method for the segmented control. This is going to be action. And we'll call it toggle controls, and we'll use the value changed event for the segmented controls. And we need to be sure that our sender is a UI segmented control. And what we want to have happen there is if the selected segment is 0, we'll hide the switches, we'll unhide the switches and hide the button. We'll do the other side, do the reverse. For the other way. Okay. We'll see if that much works. Let's run our code at this point. So the switches are showing up, switches is selected. Push the button shows up. You notice there's no outline to our button. And that's been the case since the major redesign of iOS in iOS 7 that made iOS and macOS, for that matter, look a lot flatter. It got rid of a bunch of sort of 3D and shadowing kinds of effects. Should be able to go back and pick the switches, so we can toggle between those. I'd like to put an outline around that button, and in the process we're going to show you how to use images with buttons, and we'll go ahead and implement the methods for making the switches follow each other, so that when you click one switch the other one moves, and vice versa. So we'll stop our simulation, and we're going to add images for that button. So we're going to add it to our assets.xc assets folder. And I don't want to see this in text form. Let's see if I can make this work. I do want to grab from the book source code a couple of groups of, a couple of just images. I've got here a couple of PNG images, and what I'm going to have to do is make these scalable. Let me drag them into the assets library. That's the view I'm after. I'll put my white button and my blue button here into the assets library. What I have to specify is that these can be scaled in a way that keep the corners looking normal. So I'm going to enable what's called slicing. I'll click Start Slicing, and I want this button to be scaled so that the images stay about that size regardless whether it's horizontal or vertical. Now I can move these little dotted lines around to specify where the corners are I want to preserve, but basically it's exactly right as it is. I'll do the same for the white button. So I've added those assets now to my project. I'm going to go ahead and specify in the attributes inspector for the button that I want to use them. So we'll go back to storyboard. Somehow I'm getting this, so hopefully I can get it as a pop-up. I'll select my button. It's attributes inspector. The image I want this to be a background image for the button, and I want it to be white unless it's selected. So I'm going to change this from a system button to a custom button. For the default, and I've got a bunch of states now I configure the button for. For the default state, I want my background image to be the white button, which is sliceable. And you'll notice that even though that button was not this aspect ratio, it's sort of filled properly the white button area. And for my state config of highlighted, I want to use the blue button. And now at least when I press the button, it should change color. I haven't implemented the action method. That's going to be sort of the last thing I do in this chapter. But I've got some images set up for that button. Let's go ahead and implement an action method for the switches. And what we want to have happen for the switches is when you pick one, you want the other one to follow. So let's we'll go back to, actually I need my storyboard still. And if I've got, the view controller here, I'm going to drag and drop, control drag from a switch here to write an action method, which I'm going to call onSwitchChange, and I'm going to connect both switches to it. So I'll select the others. Let me make sure I've got the right thing here. Now I got to make sure I've got the other switch selected, which may prove harder than it looks. I can certainly do it from here. And that left switch now, I'm going to control drag to that same on switch change. So let me check that both my switches have the value changed and the button does not. Okay, so I think I've got that hooked up right. But what I want to have happen is I'll let the current setting be the is on property of the sender switch. And I'm going to set both switches to whatever that setting is. and I'm going to use the animated property, animated argument, so that you can see them change. Okay. Well, let's see if that works. So we ought to be able to, for this run, the things that we've changed that we ought to be able to observe will be that clicking the button turns its outline from white to blue. And the switches ought to follow each other. So when the switches are displayed, it looks like they're working right. You go to the button, and when you click it, it's turning blue. Go back to the switches, and they are saving their state, the switches. They're in the same state if you come back to them. So looks like our switches are working. Our button is using its images properly. The last thing I want to do with this chapter is configure that action sheet and alert, the modal dialog that goes with the do something button. I'm going to do that in its own video, so I'll bring this video to an end and see you in the next one.